Hi, LSVI, and anyone else who found this. Today we're going to be talking about pirates. I have compiled a bunch of information about them that I hope you will find interesting. So, first question, who wants to be a pirate? Are you imagining sailing the seven seas, making your enemies walk the plank, buried treasure, no rules, wooden legs, the Jolly Roger flag? Maybe you got a parrot. How close are these images or these ideas to what pirates actually lived like? And at the end of this, are you going to still want to be a pirate? So piracy is the act of boarding any vessel with the intent to commit theft or any other crime, and with the intent or capacity to use force in furtherance of that act. Say what? Well, that means you're a pirate if you're gonna try and get on their ship, steal their stuff, right? Right. And you might even commit a murder or two along the way. Not cool. So piracy is as old as the history of sailing itself. Ever since they built boats and started having people sailing across the ocean, there have been pirates. Because if you think about it, how do you possibly police the entire ocean? How do the people that are enforcing the rules get to the ships fast enough? It's a lot of space to just disappear. So first of all, we all think that pirates are pretty lawless, right? Well, as you've seen if you watched the Pirates of the Caribbean, they do have some rules. There was a pirate's code of conduct. When you're on your ship, there's no fighting on board the ship. If they can't work together, they're not going to be able to do their job. They're not supposed to gamble with cards and dice on the ship. We all think that pirates are ruly and they're just gambling all the time, but when they were on board, they weren't allowed to do that. No women on board the ship. Women were considered bad luck. They were convinced they would bring bad luck to their ship. Weapons and pirates had to be ready for battle at all times. So it didn't matter. You couldn't have, you worked your 8-hour shift and you're done for the day. That didn't work. If you had to be ready, didn't matter if it was midnight, didn't matter if it was lunchtime, you still had to be ready. Every pirate gets equal amounts of food and drink. Just because you are swabbing the deck, that means mopping the deck, doesn't mean that you don't get to share in as much, that you don't get as many rations as the others. Also, every pirate gets an equal amount of all the loot that is captured. Well, wait a second. All the regular pirates. The captain and the quartermaster, they get twice as much. Any pirate who loses an arm or a leg in the fight, he gets an extra half. So, sure, you just had to have your arm cut off because your hand was completely crushed, but hey, you got extra of the gold. I think I'll take my hand. Every pirate gets a vote on where the ship goes and what the crew does. So, if you're a captain and you don't ever listen to your crew, eventually they're going to mutiny. Mutiny meaning they're going to take over the ship and you're going to end up locked up. So you have to kind of listen to them at least a little bit, right? But once the decisions were made, every pirate has to do what the captain or quartermaster says. They don't have room on their ship for people who aren't going to listen. If you're not listening, you could jeopardize the mission, or you could cause the ship to go down or something. And this is the code of conduct for the pirate ship. All right, so that's not too bad, huh? I mean, you can deal with that. But do pirates all live nice, long, healthy lives? Maybe not. There were some scary facts about being a pirate. You know, pirate's life wasn't always full of adventures and partying. Sailing is a slow way to get around, so pirates could be at sea for many months. How many of you are going stir crazy with this, with us being on what? We're still in week 1 of quarantine. You gonna make it on a ship where you can't leave? Life could be really boring, and the food they ate was sometimes, well, disgusting. Pirates would collect fresh food and drink when they landed at different ports, but because they didn't have refrigerators, freezers, or even cans to put some baked beans in, the food had to be eaten quickly once they went back to sea, or it would go stale and moldy. If a ship had been at sea for a few months, chances were all the pirates had to eat were stale, dry crackers that were probably covered in weevils. That's kind of a kind of beetle. Not very appetizing. But hey, I've heard bugs are like high in protein, maybe? Still not eating them. Not eating enough good food often made the pirates sick. Scurvy, for instance, was caused by a lack of vitamin C. Now take a second. Do you know what has vitamin C in it? Hopefully you came up with the idea of some citrus fruits, oranges, lemons, etc. So these have vitamin C. Eat plenty of them so you don't get scurvy. Pirates would know they had scurvy when their teeth started falling out. Their skin would get really pale. And I'm not talking pale as in I haven't been sunbathing, but like pale as in really just pasty, I guess. Their legs would start getting fatter, and they'd have to keep, well, rushing off to the toilet. On the other hand, if they had a stomach ache and they spent all their time rushing off to the toilet, then they probably had dysentery instead. Either of these could be really bad. So, and either of these could get bad enough to cause death. And then there's also gangrene. We now have vaccines and we keep our cuts very clean and all that. But back then, if a pirate got a cut, maybe on an arm, maybe on a leg, sometimes it would get infected. They didn't clean it well, or it just kept getting gross. You know, because they're handling some gross stuff out at sea. It's not the cleanest conditions. And so then the skin around that cut could start dying off. It gets infected, it starts basically dying. And at that point, the only real way to save the pirate is to cut off that limb. If it's an arm or a leg, just cut it off. Yikes. But you know, the alternative is death. It's one or the other. So what about yellow fever? That's one that we saw. If you take Louisiana history in 8th grade, you probably saw that point during the antebellum period where we saw a lot of yellow fever. This is caught from mosquitoes. It gives you a really high fever. Some will be able to survive this. Others are going to start vomiting black blood and die. So these are some of the natural causes of pirates dying. Let's go on to not so natural. If a pirate's caught by the Navy, they went to court. If they were found guilty, they were hung in the gallows. Yeah, they were hung in front of a large crowd. Wasn't a private execution. It's a big activity. Sometimes he might even be decapitated, where his head was cut off. If the government were really fed up with the pirates and wanted to put off others becoming the pirate, they might actually stick his head on a stick and place it somewhere lots of people can see it. That's pretty brutal. I would not want to be going to the marketplace and seeing that. So sometimes they would actually put the pirate in chains. They'd put him in a metal cage the same shape as the body and leave it hanging outside. Well, you know, till critters got it. I think they were usually dead at that point, so thank goodness for that. So this is truly disgusting stuff. I mean, even the Weevily biscuits are not sounding quite as nasty when we compare it to these things. So have I convinced you that you don't want to be a pirate yet? Well, let's go on then. Oops, maybe. Okay, pirates were a dirty lot. I mean, they're on ships for all this time. It's not like they're carrying barrels of water just so they can wash. So no one took baths back then. And pirates wore the same clothes day after day after day after another day. This lack of cleanliness resulted in boils, itchy rashes, and lice. Pirates were also plagued with fleas and a parasite called scabies. Scabies actually crawled around under their skin, making victims suffer a very nasty itch. And now I'm itching everywhere, y'all, just thinking about it. And what if they survived all that? Are they great then? Well, they could be killed in battle. They could be killed in a fight when they went to shore. They could be captured by the Navy and hung. They could be sentenced to walk the plank. So there's a lot of hazards to being a pirate. So let's go on and talk a little bit about other pirate stuff. First of all, they had what was called the Jolly Roger flag. Some of you have probably seen this image in movies. Black flag, skull and crossbones, right? It's got a black background, a white skull. There's the crossbones behind the skull that are, you know, in an X kind of shape. It was designed to be scary. You saw this skull and crossbones and you're supposed to be like, oh shoot, that's not good. This flag was not used by all pirates. It was usually only flown by those sailing in the Spanish Main. Pirates also believed that if they were whistling on a ship, it was bad luck and it could cause the weather to turn stormy, as in whistling up a storm. Pirates were very superstitious. Where did pirates get their ships? I mean, if you're a pirate, surely you don't go out and buy a ship, right? Well, no, they didn't. Almost all pirates stole their ships. Once they were, I mean, think about it. If you get caught, your ship gets confiscated. Even if you escape, do you really want that investment going down the drain? So once they had taken over a ship, they had to convert it for pirate life. This usually meant making more room for sailors to live on board, strengthening the decks because they had to hold the weight of those cannons. So what happens if a pirate ship gets caught? Well, have you ever seen those images where the pirate's captain has the big fancy hat with the feather coming out of it and he's wearing all these nice fancy clothes and the regular sailors are wearing their breeches and their little white linen shirts? Well, pretty easy to figure out which one's the captain, right? So what would happen if they were about to get caught, or if there was a chance they would get caught? The captain would actually change out of his expensive and fancy clothing and into regular crew clothing. That way he could pretend that he was just part of the crew, not somebody important, and he could hopefully escape. All right, here's something I know y'all were hoping for. Talking about some famous pirates. First one, Blackbeard. Blackbeard's real name was Edward. He lived from 1680 to about 1718. His pirate flag, it was black. It had a whole skeleton, not just the skull and crossbones, it was a whole skeleton, but his skeleton almost looked like it had straight horns coming out from the head. And it looked like in one hand he had, I don't know, a glass or something, and the other hand he had a stick with like a spear. And it looked like he was stabbing a blood red heart, because the heart had little drips of blood coming out of it. Now, a lot of people, when they saw this flag, they didn't put up a fight. They were afraid to fight. They knew that if they fought Blackbeard, Blackbeard, sorry. Forgot which one I was talking about for a second there. They knew that if they tried to fight Blackbeard, nobody's life would be spared. He would make sure every single person on board was murdered. If they didn't fight him, there was a lot better chance that he was going to take what he wanted and he was going to leave. It's not my ship. I'm not quite so invested in fighting, right? Now, Blackbeard wanted to appear as fierce as possible. He wanted people scared of him. And so he had some little tricks. What he used to do is twine bits of burning rope into his beard and into his hair. It would cause all this smoke to be around his face. And it would give him just the most evil look. This guy looked scary. The guy has got smoke coming off of him. That's not normal. That would scare people. He had a very small and fast ship. So, all these other ships, the merchant vessels, they were slow and lumbering because they had to be so big to carry so much material on them. So Blackbeard could just get in there, capture them, get what he wanted, and take off before anybody could react. He would sneak up on other boats in the dark, throw some grappling hooks, pull the boats to him, tie it off. Him and his pirates jump on, get what they want, then jump back on their ship, cut the ropes, and go. It was really pretty efficient. But eventually Blackbeard did die. He was in a battle, shot 5 times and slashed 20 times before he died. To be honest, what finally killed him, somebody beheaded him from behind. And they hung his head on the masthead of the ship as a warning to other pirates. Then we had Bartholomew, Black Bart Roberts. We always hear about Blackbeard. I don't know that we hear about Black Bart as often, which is strange because Black Bart was actually the most successful pirate in the Caribbean. What happened was he was second mate on a slaver ship until it was captured by pirates. He was given no choice but to join the pirates. Join us or die. Not a lot of option there. 6 weeks after he had been forced to join the pirates, the captain of the pirate ship he was on, Captain Davis, was killed in battle by pirate hunters. The crew ended up taking a vote and made him their new captain. His first order of business was to attack the town where his former captain was killed and avenge his killing. Avenge his killing, meaning get back at them for killing him. Now, There are 4 flags associated with Captain Black Bart. Let's see. He had one, it was the full skeleton. In one hand, the guy held an hourglass, and in the other hand, held crossbones. To the side was a red heart with a spear pointed down at the heart and drips of blood coming from the bottom of the heart. Let's see, the skeleton represented death. The hourglass, the skeleton represented death. That's kind of all I got for you there. One of Robert's other flags was also black. It had a white figure representing Robert's being Black Bart, holding a flaming sword and standing on 2 skulls. So there's a skull under each foot. It's kind of awful. Beneath was written ABH and AMH, standing for a Barbadian head and a Martesian's head. Roberts hated these 2 governors so much for sending pirate hunters after him. That was the guys' heads. And it was always cruel to ships that were captured when they were from either place. Didn't want to be from there. When he was killed, according to Johnson, his flag had a skeleton and a man with a flaming sword. It signified defiance of death. The flag most commonly associated with Roberts is a black one with a pirate and a skeleton, both of them holding an hourglass. Okay, so I said he was probably one of the greatest. Why, right? I haven't heard anything that amazing about him. Whoop-de-doo, he had 4 flags. Yay. Well, here we go. Black Bart Roberts was the greatest pirate of his generation. It is estimated that he took some 400 ships during his 3-year career. It's interesting, again, it's interesting that he is not as famous as his contemporaries, since he was the better pirate. Think about it this way. 400 ships over 3 years. That is 133 ships a year. Breaking that down further, that means he was capturing a ship almost every 3rd day. Pretty impressive. That's a lot of work. His nickname, Black Bart, seems to have come more from his dark hair and complexion than from any sort of cruelty in his nature, although it's certain that he could be as ruthless as any of the other pirates. His death, he was killed in battle by a cannon. His body was thrown overboard by his crew. He had 152 crew members that were captured. 52 were Africans. Unfortunately, they were sold back into slavery. 54 were hanged. 37 were sentenced to serve as indentured servants and sent to the West Indies. And the rest were acquitted, or they were found not guilty of the crime, because they could prove that they had been forced to join the crew against their will. I have no idea how you would prove that. All right, and I guess before I wrap this up, I should talk about some female pirates. We have 2 very famous female pirates, Bonny and Mary Read. These are the most famous and most ferocious women pirates in history, and they are the only ones known to have plied their trade in the Western Hemisphere. Do we all know where the Western Hemisphere is? Think about it in your head. Which way is north, south, east, west? Okay, the Western Hemisphere has the Americas in it, yes. Bonny started out as a housemaid. She fell in love with a ne'er-do-well, and she married him and ran off with him against her father's wishes. Ne'er-do-well meaning his kind of no good. Wasn't a real good person. Soon after, she fell in love with Captain Jack Rackham and joined him on his ship. So she kind of left the other guy. Okay. So that's all I'm going to say about her right at this moment. Then there was Mary Read. Her father had disappeared on a sea voyage, and he was never heard from again. Mary's mother needed some help, so she appealed to her mother-in-law. When she took Mary to see her mother-in-law, she dressed her up as a boy because she knew that her mother-in-law didn't like little girls. The mother-in-law was fooled, and she did help support them for quite a while until her death, at which point Mary continued to masquerade as a boy. Just, I guess she had gotten used to it, and she liked playing like she was a boy. So she eventually, dressed as a boy, pretending to be a boy or a man, she became a crew on the ship that was eventually captured by Rackham. Remember, that's where Anne is right now. She's a crew member there. Still dressed as a man, she joined Rackham's pirate crew. Anne soon discovered Mary's secret, and they became friends. They were known for their violent tempers, their ferocious fighting. Their fellow crew members knew that in times of action, no one was as ruthless and bloodthirsty as these two women were. Captain Jack, nicknamed Calico Jack, was a well-known pirate in those days, but his reputation has survived the ages primarily because these two women were on his crew. That's why we remember him. Eventually the crew was captured. They were taken to stand trial in Jamaica. Captain Jack and his male members of his crew were tried and sentenced to hang. Anne and Mary were also found guilty and sentenced to death. Now what actually happened to them is the subject of not quite knowing. I believe that, Mary was said to have died of a fever, and so that's what happened to her. Anne, no records of her execution were ever found. Some say her wealthy father bought her release, and she ended up settling down. And then other people say that she lived out her life in south of England, owning a tavern and telling people about her adventures. All right, well, if you stuck with me this long, good for you. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing all my students again as soon as all of this is over.